Thank you. Welcome, everybody. And today's Good Tech, an ongoing discussion about ethics in technology. I'm Elizabeth Perry with IDCA. Just a note, if you'd like to join in today's discussion, ask a few questions for me or my guest today, dial the US number on your screen, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. So it seems like the latest trend in business today, especially technology worldwide, is the DPO, or Data Protection Officer. I mean, even Facebook has one. So we talk a lot about Facebook, so we all think that's kind of funny. What exactly is a DPO? What do they do? And why the sudden cropping up? We'll answer some of those questions today. Today, to attempt to answer those questions and more, we're going to speak to one of the experts on privacy here in Europe. It's my pleasure to introduce founder and chairman of the Ei Dpp, or European Association of Data Protection Professionals. Please welcome Marc Vrijhof.
Hello.
Marc, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
And so first off, I want to talk about you a little bit here. I want to talk about your journey, because you've been a few places before you entered the privacy arena. So tell us a little bit about those experiences that brought you where you are today.
Okay, thank you. I am a alumni of the University of Leiden, which is one of the oldest law schools in Europe. And after that, I became part of an organization, Special Investigation Branch, and that actually was my earliest experience with privacy. At that time, we had a Dutch law, the Wet Persoonsregistratie, and we had to, as an organization, abide by this law. And I was part of a working group, so that was my first experience. Then the internet came, and I joined. What was in the early 90s, a real community of people active in that area. And that was a great time. That ended up with Gravity Zoo and Workomnet. Gravity Zoo was a platform as a service company. We started it very early. And after that, it was Workomnet, and that was my first community effort on the internet, dealing with all kinds of professionals, giving them a platform and providing them a means to get in contact with their customers. It took until 2014. In the meantime, I still had I still was involved in privacy, taking care of the privacy within the companies that I've run. But it took me until 2014, 2015 to decide to get back to this area of expertise. And the reason is very simple. Through my career, I noticed that technology was creeping up, that it was getting more and more into our daily lives, and I felt, and I was part of that development. I built systems that were creeping into our daily lives with good intentions at the time, because it was facilitating, it was empowering, and so on. But more and more, I realized that big companies with this technology were going to create a 1984 type of environment. And I decided that it was time for me, in the third part of my career, to do something with the knowledge that I gained. And I decided to pick up my law school knowledge again, and specialized in data protection, the European part of it. And after a couple of years training people in this area, because I quickly started training people, I felt that organizing these group of individuals was a necessity. In the GDPR, we were given, or we are given, a special position, but we are not organized. So I felt that the part of this third part of my journey had to be organizing these groups of professionals and giving them a platform to discuss what their position should be, and get in touch with or communicate that message to the stakeholders within the GDPR arena. So that's how I got from being a law student to what I'm doing today.
So that's the EADPP, and maybe we should just tell the audience a little bit about what exactly the EADPP is and why it's important.
It stands for the European Association of Data Protection Professionals, and it's an organization that is for and by privacy professionals, privacy professionals that are active within the European Economic Area. That's a little bit more than just the EU. Countries like Norway are part of it as well. And
okay.
What is the purpose of the EADPP is really to discuss among each other the position that we want to fulfill as DPOs. Are you aware that within the GDPR, DPOs are given a position of strength? They have to supervise the organizations they work for in an independent manner, and if these organizations do not abide by the GDPR, they have to advise them on how to better organize their data processing to be compliant with the GDPR, and at the end of the day reach a status of accountability. And that's the position that they have. There are very specific tasks mentioned, but in general, this is what it is about. And in that force field of parties, you have the European Data Protection Board, you have the national authorities, you have the controllers, the organizations that process data, and it is within this force field of sometimes different interests, contrary interests. How do you say in the proper English?
Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest. Yes, yes. Within this arena, the DPO has to position himself. And there are still a lot of questions that have not been clarified, that do not have a clear answer. And if we want to play this role in a proper manner, we have to be part of the discussion how this force field is going to work. And as individuals, that's impossible. So you need to be organized. You might call it a union of DPOs.
Okay, let's get into the DPO thing for the audience, the data protection officer. So we attended a privacy conference in Stockholm at one point, and one of the keynote speakers was the DPO of, I think it was Facebook. Yeah. And the audience was actually laughing.
Yeah.
So what are, like, so people, are they a joke? I mean, tell me what the data protection officer, why are they cropping up everywhere, and what's the real purpose? What's the real role of a data protection officer?
If you look at organizations, and look at the purpose of an organization, The purpose is to make money or to achieve a certain goal, and that they have a certain self-interest is, I think, an acceptable and normal state. On the other side of the equation, we have data subject customers. And within the roles of the different players, organizations would like to have as much data as possible. And we need to have a group of professionals that represent the interest of the data subject in relation to the organization. Organizations that want to control those personal data, want to use it for their benefit.
Okay.
And it's this delicate balance that requires, let's call it a referee, a data protection officer sometimes, because not all organizations are obliged to have a DPO. So it's not that every organization has a DPO or needs to have a DPO. No, under certain circumstances, that's going to be obligatory. And if you do not fulfill these circumstances, then a privacy officer is sufficient. And that's somebody internally who runs the project of becoming GDPR compliant.
Now, yeah. Is it the same thing in the US as it is in Europe, that a data protection officer, do they have the same requirements, or?
I'm not aware that in the US you are obliged to have a data protection officer. I think that's a European qualification. But if you are addressing the European market from the US, let's take WhatsApp. WhatsApp is an organization that addresses with its application on mobile and other the European data subjects. And if they want to do that, then they have to abide by the GDPR.
Right.
And suddenly, yeah. Sorry.
No, I was saying we've talked a lot about GDPR on this show, but maybe maybe just to sort of give the audience a little refresher on what GDPR is and what kind of impact it has on businesses worldwide.
Well, the GDPR really regulates the way organizations that want to address their that want to be part of the European market, that deliver their products and services to the European market and have customers within the European market. They have to abide by these sets of rules to be able to work that market. And in that sense, we say, well, it's all well if you want to sell your goods and services here, but if so, then we require you to make certain that you process the personal data according to the GDPR. And that means not necessarily that these data have to be located in Europe. That's only in certain cases. But you have to abide by the European rules as stipulated in the GDPR, in the General Data Protection Regulation. And in certain cases, you have to, like WhatsApp, they have to have a representation in the EU. If they don't have an office, but they address themselves to the Dutch market, then they have to have a representation, a person who functions as an intermediate between WhatsApp and the market that they address. So if I have a specific question to ask to WhatsApp, then this is the person that I can address myself to.
So how far behind is the rest of the world from Europe? I mean, as far as privacy and having these sort of entities, well, people.
I think if I take, there are a number of countries that are visited by the European Commission, and they have laws and regulations in place that provide sufficient protection if you compare it to the GDPR, and therefore are allowed to, are qualified as countries that are safe to do business with. Certain countries do not have that status, but the number of countries that are on the list of safeguarded countries is growing.
Okay.
The US, we have the privacy, EU-US Privacy Shield, is a law, is an international agreement that functions in that way. But you have to be part of that agreement as an organization. And if you're not allowed to work the European market in terms of gathering and processing personal data.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead. You had a question.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, does everybody know this? Because, I mean, of course they don't know this, but so when I asked how far behind the rest of the world is, I mean, how many companies are really playing by the rules? And maybe you don't know the answer to that, but like a percentage of companies that are really not GDPR compliant.
Let me put it this way. If you, for instance, take the financial industry, yes, they have systems in place that have been designed 20, 30 years ago. When I was a young man, at that time, these systems were built. If you look at the GDPR, then you see an article in there that it talks about privacy by design. Yes, you see articles that deal with the time that you are allowed to keep personal data, and the moment that you have to either anonymize it or delete the data. Well, these systems were built in such a way that if I would delete the data, the system no longer works.
Wow.
Therefore, it is fairly impossible for these organizations to be fully compliant with the law. Yes, they are working on it, and I think this is the case with many organizations. I think a very good comparison is if you look at fiscal responsibility with organizations. We all have a good feeling of what that means. When you've worked within an organization, you know you have to file your costs, and to get your money back, you have to do invoices. You have all kinds of processes that you have to perform to be fiscally responsible. Take that and think about data, personal data.
Yeah.
It's a similar process, and that's not going to be an overnight switch. Okay, now we are suddenly all accountable according to the GDPR. That's impossible. It's going to take many years before the majority of organizations are going to be in line with what the GDPR requires.
Right. I mean, yeah. So they're being lenient, or sorry?
No, I was interrupting you.
No. I'm saying so the powers that be are being lenient with companies, or because Facebook's already paid however many millions in fines, and
yes,
Google's paid.
There is a difference between being an organization that is willing to work towards accountability and organizations that are really resisting the process. Right. And I think those the company that you just mentioned could be part of the number of companies that really test the water and do not like this development, because in essence, if you look at the GDPR, and the position given to the data subject, it could be very well the case, and this is one of my the topics that I like to talk about, is the data subject is really given a kind of pseudo ownership on data, on his data, in the GDPR. We can say, well, I'm not going to permit you to use my data. I want to be forgotten. I want you to change my data. I want to know all. I want to have an insight in what data you have on me. All those activity, all those rights are rights that really represent a position of ownership. Hey, they are my data, but they're actually not my data. I can act in certain manners that really tell organizations that they are no longer in control of the data. And so far, from the beginning of the internet, there was freedom all over the place, and everybody could use everything. And we're now getting into a realm where control is given back to the populace and not to the organizers of the internet.
So what is the mission then of the EADPP?
To provide the privacy professional a platform to define how they are going to position themselves in this force field of different powers. I think to unite the DPO and have, in certain instances, one voice. Okay, that is, I think, if I would have to summarize it, to create a one voice message, or to create a mess. It's difficult to state.
I mean, so you're talking about you're organizing.
I'm giving the EADPP wants to provide the its members a platform to define how they want to be seen within the force field that they work in, and influence how certain parts of the GDPR are going to be implemented.
Okay.
Because
And
that's what they control. They control the implementation of the GDPR within organizations. They have to supervise it. And let's take a topic like new technology. We just did some research on what is new technology within the GDPR. If you look at the ICO versus and see how they describe this, then it comes down to, if I haven't used that technology within my organization, it could be qualified as new technology. And if I'm using new technology, then that could be a reason for the organization to have to go through a data protection impact assessment, which is a very labor-intensive type of job that needs to be done. So all those answers to questions like that, we should be, as DPOs, part of the premium, or the group of people, of professionals who provide feedback on our daily practice, and make certain that the authorities and are aware of our experiences and take those into account. So that's one of our missions. The second one is to create a certification for DPOs, a European certificate that is provided by and through the professionals themselves. We are a entity. The DPO is an entity recognized within the GDPR, And I think it is up to us to define what the standard is that a DPO has to answer to. What are the rules of ethics that we have to abide to? There are no rules of ethics, and I think we should control that process and create our own rules of ethics so that if somebody is acting in a certain way that is contrary to what we have agreed upon within the EADPP as being our rules of conduct.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment, uh, we need to control that ourselves.
Right. And so,
Accountants.
and sorry, say again?
It's comparable to the accountants. They
Uh-huh.
also have their own rules of conduct.
So aside from this sort of certificate that you're going to offer people, is there anything else that sort of, perks or whatever they get out of this EADPP?
I think that's already
That's pretty good.
pretty big package that we have to deliver. And since we are young and we are now present in 30 countries, we have in a short time we've gained about 600 members, and it's growing on a daily basis. So there's clearly a need, an understanding that this is a good development. I think if we achieve those two tasks, then I think we are doing for the coming 2-3 years a very good job.
That's excellent. And what are the criteria to join? I mean, who's eligible?
If you are a privacy professional, and that means that you're actively working within the industry, and you are working within the European Economic Area, then independent of your nationality, you can become member. But you have to address your activities towards our to this geographical area.
Okay.
And you have yeah.
Sorry, and how many members do you expect?
What we expect is, in the beginning, I put in a lot of effort, and it grew in a short time to 600. We are now expanding the people who are doing similar work. And so I hope by the end of this year, it's going to be 3,000. But there's a potential for 15,000 professionals in Europe that could become a member of this organization.
Mm-hmm. And where do you see, and so you see yourself in 5 years with 15 million DPOs. What about borders? 15,000.
Yeah, not million.
Well, could you expand this across borders, or is this only in going to be in Europe? Obviously, that's what the acronym is.
We have members that are located in the US. We have members that are located in Brazil, but they work they as a privacy professional. They are dealing with the GDPR because their company addresses their activity to the European market, to the European Economic Area. And that means that they are actively involved with the GDPR in this area. So they need to know, they need to be part of this, this joint effort to get a good understanding of what a DPO needs to do, what his supervisory task is, what type of advice he can give, what his relation to national authorities is. That's pretty uncharted territory. I mean, the GDPR gives it's in Dutch we call it more a raamwerk, which is it's written in such a way that it can endure technological development. But at the same time, that requires that we have to now define certain terms within the context of today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you're headquartered in the Netherlands, correct?
Yes, that's where we started. Yes. That was in November. It was in Paris that I met I was at a conference with on the GDPR, and I met at the time the DPO, EMEA of eBay, and a couple of others, and we were talking. And at a certain moment, I said, "Well, I'm working on this idea to set up an association because I think that's going to be necessary." And their reaction was not negative; it was actually positive. And at that time, I met the co-founder, Romeo Kadir, who is the vice chairman of the organization. And it took another 3/4 of a year. And then we said, okay, we're going to do it. We are going to start we're going to found the Ei Dpp, and it culminated on the 28th of November in 2018 at a notary office where we signed the bylaws, and from that moment on, it's history, and we are now pushing ahead and making it so far, I think, successful.
So you're one of your main foci is to help people organize or to organize the DPOs across Europe, right?
Yeah. Yes, and it's maybe an important part is as well. Within the Ei Dpp, we have it's a bottom-up organization. It's not that the board is going to say to its members, and this is our policy, and this is the way we are going to work. No, it's the other way around. We have organized the Ei Dpp in such a way that you have national branches. These national branches can bring certain of the members to the General Assembly and say, well, we would like this member to become part of one of the 4 committees. We have 4 committees. One is on strategy and policy, on certification, of course, general affairs, and events and communication. The strategy and policy committee is going to be very, very important. They are going to organize research in areas that we are looking, as DPOs, we are looking for answers. And they are going to organize the members in such a way that from the members, we gather the information to take a certain stand with regards to such research questions. Like if you look at the conference 2019 program in November, we are going to address in a Oxford-style debate the position of a DPO within that force field that I talked about. That's going to be our first, let's say, communique to the world of privacy, to the industry, where we say, well, we as Ei Dpp think that our position in this force field should be looked at in this manner. And that's the way we want to organize the members and address important questions. And as you can, maybe you have counted, there are 3. There's the chairman, there's the treasurer, and the secretary. And they have 4 committee members in the board. So the members are in the majority. They decide what happens. And that's the way we've organized it. Very democratic, very bottom up. And it's for, and as I said, it's for and by privacy professionals. It as our members.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you something about walking the walk as data privacy professionals. You have to do things that are in line with privacy, like collecting data. Yes. Or, is that something that's difficult to do, and how do you do that?
Could you clarify your question?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm talking about walking the walk. So we have people that are data privacy professionals.
Yes.
And so you have to use tools when you collect data that are that are in line with the thing that you are professing?
Okay, okay. What we, of course, as a data protection professional, you have to organize yourself in such a way that it's not like with the plumbers. Within the plumber's house, it leaks the most. You know, you have the most leaks. No, we want to be proficient in our area of business. And let me give you an example. We just signed this agreement with an organization, ITCA, well known to you.
Yes.
Why? Because we want to provide our members an environment where they can discuss in private the issues that they want to address, where they can leave their data in an environment where they are certain that that their data are not going to be visited, or their mail going to be analyzed, or other types of activities that certain processors or controllers are doing with the personal data. And we looked into the market. We ran into your organization, the organization that you're part of, and studied it and decided let's work together. And we are at the beginning of introducing this to our members. The board okayed it, and now we are moving into let's say operations, and invite members to become part of the ITCA platform.
Awesome. Well, we're thrilled to have you part of the ITCA cosmos ecosystem.
Yeah, no,
but
it's an important step. It's an important step to show also that it can be different. That there are models that are based on mutual respect.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we at ITCA, we see privacy as a root right, as a human right that we already have, and it's just we need to enforce this. We need to make sure that we get this right. What do you think about that?
There is a balance. We need to look at it's a fundamental right. Yes, that's no question, but it's a right that needs to be balanced out against another fundamental right. That's freedom of speech. Yeah, and those two, and here you get, okay, where is the line? When is it? It's about your fundamental right to privacy, or is it, in a certain case your freedom of speech more important? There's, I think, it's a German case where a politician's head was painted on in a painting with somewhat of a pornographic nude body. And at that point, it became a case. And it was, and this is one of these cases, well, do I intrude privacy too much in this case? Or is freedom of speech more important? In that case, it was decided that freedom of speech was more important because the politician, everybody knew that this was not a real representation, and the politician had a position of a public position, and the judge at that point said, okay, here freedom of speech is more important. And that's we have to make certain that both live and prosper, and because they are both very important. Freedom of speech is a very important fundamental right, and our right to, let's say, the right that is enshrined in the GDPR is also a very important fundamental right. And so it's not, I'm not of the school of being a purist on the one hand and throwing away another fundamental right. No, we have to learn to deal with it. And in the past, when we go centuries back, privacy was not as valued as it is today. And so there is a development in how we envision coexistence of these two fundamental rights. Today, if there are 50 billion devices in the Internet of Things, and you get into a type of situation that you can see happening in China, then at that point you start to say, hey, wait a minute, that's too much of intrusion, and so that's the name of the game. We are looking, we are finding our way, and it's a moving target.
It's interesting. We a long time back now, we had a show with Alexander Hanf, who I'm not sure if you know who he is. He's one of our advisors, and he believes that, and along with other people, believe that you can't have one without the other. That if you don't feel that you have the right to say, or if you don't feel you have privacy, you won't say what you really want to say, kind of thing. So it's an interesting thought.
That's was that meant in a micro environment? If you are, that's true. If you don't feel comfortable, secure in the environment that you live, that you have the Stasi kind of feeling, then at that point you stop talking. And once they are capable, once organizations are capable to let's say monitor thoughts, we get even further than that, because there are certain companies that feel that is a venue that they are interested in to learn more about how our brains work. Well, that's a very tricky area to move into. If you talk about feeling private enough to express your thoughts, then it's going to be difficult. And but on a macro level, being let's say an upcoming activist in a certain area, I need to have my freedom of speech. I need to be able to express my thoughts also in public, and in certain cases that will be in contrary or be not in line with the privacy of maybe some people. But at that point, freedom of speech can be more important.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's a difference between privacy and anonymity. Being anonymous, there's a difference between those two things. So what does the future hold, Marc? What are we heading down the right path? You were telling me earlier before we went on the air that you're an optimist.
Yes.
Do you think we're heading the right way, or are we going to be 1984 all over again?
No, I believe that the reason why the GDPR initiative was started was politicians recognized that to have a digital economy, you need the trust of the people. If the trust is gone, then people are no longer willing to provide their information, their data. And I think in that sense, it was a very good move of the European Commission and all other parties involved to start this GDPR project, because it gives us a platform where we can find a balance between economic growth, which we need to finance our debts, and on the other hand, make certain that the people that you want to sell your goods to and from whom you need data to better serve them, that they don't feel misused, that they are reduced to let's say faceless consumers, you know, respect the citizen in that sense. And I believe that the GDPR is the beginning of the answer to finding this balance. And in that sense, I have I'm positive about the future, and I'm glad to live in an area of the world where the GDPR is. I'm really glad, because I can see other areas where people are, like you said, even afraid to express their thoughts, their ideas, to provide their data, even in private.
Yeah, very true. And we talked about what must be done in, I mean, is GDPR enough? Is there something else that we need to be doing to ensure our rights, or is GDPR just what we need right now and we're going to go from there?
I think we need a lot of jurisprudence. That's one. We need authorities that are willing to uphold the GDPR, so that the DPO we can do our job. But if the authorities are not going to enforce the law, then at a certain time, our bosses or the companies that we consult are going to say, well, if I do not abide, they're not coming after me. So why should I bother even to do this? So we need authorities to enforce the law, so that we can do our job in the proper manner as intended by the GDPR. So this playing field needs to be further developed, and everybody has to play the role and find out what role that is to realize the ultimate goal, and that is to respect the citizens and respect their control, protect their data in a proper manner, so that they can live in an open and secure environment in a society where they know that yes, my data are out there, but I know that they are only used for the purposes that they were collected, and not as in the early days. And I was part of that. We developed at that time, and I'm talking about 25 years ago. We developed systems, and we, while developing, said, "Hey, that would be nice if we could do this and we could do that." And we were collecting all kinds of information. That was the early days of automation, and then came the internet. So that we are here where we are now, it's clear to me. But if you look at the further development, how we will finally end up, that's first find out who has to do what, and then new technology comes in, and we have to adapt and be sufficiently flexible to play this role, to have the GDPR and maybe other laws in place that address this balance, this really necessary balance in the future.
Yeah. We only have a couple of minutes. I can't believe it's already that time almost, but do you have any other words of wisdom for our audience today? You want to leave them with something, a nugget of?
Don't use the GDPR is a very useful development. Look at it as what I already mentioned as your fiscal hygiene within your organization. I think if you organize yourself according to what the intention is of the GDPR, your company is going to be successful, because more and more individuals, more and more, let's say, banks are going to require GDPR accountability. if you are not GDPR accountable, it's very well possible that the bank will say, well, I cannot give you a loan, or that your customers say, well, your competitor is out there and he's treating my personal data the way it should be. You don't seem to do this. I'm leaving you as a customer. So it's you really have to look at it that way.
Yeah.
And if you do that, then you can be successful in tomorrow's market. If not, you might become, how do you say it, obsolete.
Obsolete, yeah. I mean, it's healthy competition out there, maybe with
Yeah,
GDPR compliance.
it's a
It's
new
great.
dimension of competition.
Yeah. If you have any questions from Marc or the IDCA team, please find us on idka.com, www.idka.com. You can sign up for a free account, bring your private groups or organizations, and start something new. For more information on the EADPP and how you can participate in this initiative, it's www.eadpp.eu. So, Marc, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to have you back again as it grows into a huge monster.
It's my pleasure. It's not going to be a monster. It's going to be a very nice organization.
I suppose that wasn't a very good choice of words.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. And I hope everyone has a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are.
And
thanks for joining us.
Having me. And I'll be happy to come back again and tell you about the progress that we've made.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, everybody.